Hello, I'm Kat, and welcome to my third Watch Me Paint video. You've previously watched me paint a few pictures, including a fan-made League of Legends skin for Ahri and a fan-made League of Legends skin for Kindred. These are the previous two paintings in this series, and now I'm gonna paint the third champion that I really like to play and whose design I really like, Lux, Lady of Luminosity. This time things are gonna be a little different. I'll start with the background, and I will talk about how watercolors interact with acrylic colors as I go. I hope you will learn something in the process, and let's get going. I start most of my paintings by making a pencil sketch on the final piece of paper that I want to use. And at the very beginning you see me erase most of the sketch. The reason for that is because pencil is usually oil-based, and if you don't erase it, and you leave it and even color it with watercolor, it will shine through sooner or later. And I wanted to have a beautiful background, and in order for the colors not become muddied, I erased most of it so only very faint lines were visible, so I knew where to recreate the sketch later on when the background was complete. For colors, I chose this very beautiful gradient. You see me using the reference picture of a prism in the background, gradient from orange over yellow and white back to blue, and it is supposed to remind you of the laser, which is the ultimate ability of Lux character. Then I go in with water-soluble color pencils and I redraw the sketch. I improved a little bit on the original one. I added some armor pieces and the wand that is hovering above her hand. So in this series, I wanted to draw my favorite League of Legends champions. What if they had died and they were reanimated back to life? So the Ahri and the Kindred you saw before, Ahri is a fox spirit, so she'll probably come back as like some kind of ghost, holding the skulls of her enemies and haunting people, whereas Kindred came from the forest, so she comes back as this mushroom forest creature, almost a zombie. But Lux, she is a warrior of the Demacia kingdom, so if she were to die, they would probably take her body, disassemble it, and then build a golem, and then put her bones and soul and like reanimated her. Kind of like Orianna, a different League of Legends champion, whose lore is she was an alive person at some point, but then was built into this automaton. So I looked up reference pictures of different kinds of golems that people have come up with. I looked up robots or android cyborgs in order to get a better sense of where it would be assembled and where to put the lines. You see like the lines on her neck, I tried to keep them as close to human anatomy as possible, so like the neck would probably swivel around where a human's neck also swivels, and it would be lines on the actual collarbones. My brother made the great suggestion to add a bunch of petricite, which is a marble-like stone with golden veins that is used a lot in League of Legends lore. There's a different champion, Galio, that is kind of like a stone gargoyle that is completely made from petricite. So I chose to make Lux's skin out of these metal or plastic plates that kind of should resemble blue porcelain, and her armor and hair would be from a petricite-like material, which would also contribute to this gold and blue color scheme. And you know me, I like my bones and my anatomy, so some good old X-ray action was necessary. And I found this beautiful Orianna skin splash art that has her midsection be transparent to display the inner works, and that's what I really wanted to do for Lux's stomach section and her upper limbs. While working on this painting, you will see me run into a lot of issues with different colors interacting with each other. Obviously the background and the base of everything I do is created with watercolor, but since I painted a background and I wanted white areas on top of it, I used quite a bit of acrylic. I used a mix of white acrylic mixed with watercolor and then also pure acrylic paint later on. But I ran into issues of these two colors interacting. Let's interrupt the painting process for a little bit while I show you what I mean. In the top left you can see a splotch of orange watercolor and me applying a darker color on top of it. You see it's semi-transparent and covers it a fair amount, but the bottom color still shows through. Then if you make a mistake, you can always use water to reactivate the watercolor and kind of dab it away, making it disappear almost entirely. And then you can apply the new color onto that new patch, and then you will not have the other color show through. Whereas if you apply it on top, the bottom one will always show through unless you use many layers. And obviously that works a lot better if you apply dark on top of light. The other way around it doesn't work unless you use acrylics, which you see me do in the next example. I'm using yellow acrylic paint on top of darker blue acrylic paint. You also need quite a few layers, especially with cheaper acrylics. You have to wait for it to be dry and then apply another layer, but after a while you can achieve almost perfect coverage. Even though acrylics are also water-based and water-soluble, they cannot be reactivated with water like watercolors can, which you see me demonstrate next. A lot of acrylics are very opaque, and especially if you apply a darker color on top of light, the light color almost never shows through, which makes it great for if you want to correct mistakes. So acrylics, since it's very thick, it almost kind of seals the page. If you try to apply watercolor on top of acrylics, it cannot seep into the page, it just kind of stays on top of the layer. And if you smudge it afterwards, you see that the color that was on top of the acrylic is almost entirely smudged away, and you can like reapply it, but it will never look as good as if you had just worked on the porous paper. As we continue on Lux, I used white on a lot of her hair, on her armor, and on the transparent section on her upper legs and upper arms. I just kind of took a brush and then dabbed white on top of it to create kind of the illusion of glass. And that worked pretty well in most cases, since it was just a very thin layer. But where I applied it in a very thick coat, for example, on the armor pieces on her upper thighs, I started out making them way too small and then I made them larger. So they have quite thick coat of acrylic, and as I progress and I apply gray watercolor on top of it, or like black watercolor mixed with white acrylic, you see these two areas become a little muddy, and I have to go over them quite a few times. But yeah, at this point I'm pretty happy with the painting. I go ahead, I apply coats of shading. I struggled a little bit with where the light was coming from, since her background was so light and it was going to symbolize her laser. So it would have made sense for the image to be backlit. And also the reference image that I used for the pose had the lighting coming from the right. But at some point I decided that the lighting should come from the upper left, since it was like a nice direction for the painting. The laser was pointing that way, she was kind of looking that way in her heroic pose. So I ended up going back and applying a bunch of shading to the right underside of her armor pieces, to her left arm and left leg, which added a lot more depth to it. At this point I was unsure what to do with the background. It seemed kind of empty and she seemed to be just kind of lost in the middle of it all. So before trying it out on the final painting and potentially ruining it, I took a picture with my iPad and then started sketching in Procreate on top. I painted the Damasian flag, put it in the background, which I ended up really liking. And then I also looked at Lux's default splash art and saw that she had a bunch of semi-transparent cloth hanging from her armor pieces, so I chose to integrate it as well. League of Legends splash arts tend to look very clean and polished, so I wanted to give her a little bit of a rugged look, so I added all the scratches and little cracks in her armor. And then you see me use the same technique I used for the glass again, applying the white acrylics with a soft brush and just gently dabbing it on. So you can still see the stuff that's behind it, and it just creates this illusion of transparency, like transparent cloth or transparent glass. I also really like the touch of the golden border. I kept hoping that it wouldn't end up too busy, since she has so many details and layers to her armor, and so there's just a lot going on, and her face is fairly simple in comparison. So I ended up taking a picture, turning it to grayscale, flipping it, and kind of just taking a step back and reevaluating it after having a look at it so often. And I figured I have to make the corners kind of darker, so you look more towards the middle. So I applied more darker tones of orange to the bottom left, I darkened her legs, and applied darker blues above the flag. And then I also decided that when I was gonna make prints of them, I was gonna cut the bottom 1 or 2 centimeters off. The wand was the final part. I kind of mixed feelings about how it turned out. On the one hand, it looked pretty good with the layers of light. On the other hand, it added to the business of the painting, but at that point I had already started, and I was like, oh, you know, I've worked on this for so long, I'm kind of blind to all of it. I'll just finish the original vision I had, and then we'll see how it turned out. So this is it. This is she, the final painting. I think I'm really happy in general with how it came out. I was really concerned about this area, about her not popping out from the background enough. But I think in the end she did come around, and the colors are great. I love the combination of orange and teal. If you look at any movie poster from the 2010s, you'll know what I mean. Orange and teal, best combo. And yeah, I hope you got something from the video. I try to share tips as much as I can, and let me know if you've learned something, if you have an idea of what I can improve or what else I can draw. Give me a like and a comment to boost the YouTube algorithm, and expect more art from me. I'm working on a lot of new projects. I think I'm done with League of Legends for now, even though it's a great source of inspiration with all their weird character designs. I'm gonna be working on some personal stuff, and yeah, let me know what else you'd like to see. Till then, bye!